how would I say, our main entrepreneurial approach or things to do was just to survive. And we did that. But during that time, we developed knowledge. And that knowledge made us kind of in the tropics now the organization to go to when we talk about native tropical fine timber. And later then we use this for the generation forest. What is the generation forest? Let me share something to show this and as an example. Can I share this? Do you see it?
And you are sharing it.
Super. Okay, let me. One second. So need to clean up something here. So what we do is we buy cattle land, we plant mixed species, mostly native. We are not dogmatic. The only dogma we have is not to have one. So, but the focus is definitely on native tree species. We, over the years, do selective logging, and we never clear cut. So, and by that, we create a permanent forest system, which is the highest and best use for the soils on which we are working, which is the neotropical soils here, which are not suitable for long-term agriculture or cattle. What we are doing by that is we are basically combining the biodiversity of a natural forest with the productivity of the timber plantations. And what we can say now is that these three elements in this forest, it is a productive forest, it's a biodiverse forest, and it is a permanent forest. So by doing that, we have then worked on different channels of capital to finance these projects. And the interesting thing is we were very early in the carbon market. We actually believe that the first transaction was done by us. We haven't found an older one. 1998, we sold 45 tons of carbon certificates to the US. And so, but at that time it was very immature and it did not really work out. We worked with the Biocarbon Fund, etc. But the transaction costs were horrendous and the prices were very low. But since a few years, we came back into the market, and now the interesting things happened. All these things which made us like the crazy alternative impact Birkenstock kind of offer now convert into something valuable. And instead of telling the people that they have to accept less money on their investments because of the impacts, because of sustainability, these different impact elements we have integrated, and we call this the impact hand, where we say, so it's basically high carbon capture. It is creation of habitat. I'm just back from Darien, and we found another jaguar female with a cub in one of the areas. So we have very high recreation of biodiversity. While we produce timber, we rebuild the soil. And of course, on the hydrological capacity of the watersheds, it's obvious that this has a very positive sponge-like of effect. And of course, very important that we reduce poverty in these rural areas. Panama is known for the skyscrapers and for the Hong Kong-like economy, but we also have a Haiti-like reality in the indigenous communities we work with. And we do this in a non-paternalistic way. For example, our nursery is placed as of an invitation of an indigenous community in the neighborhood of that community. And now there are 30 women are now bringing back first the pride of working there, doing this, learning all this, bringing back money and social security. That's the kind of impact we are creating on the social side. But more and more interestingly, it is also something we have seen formerly only in Europe and parts of the US. It's kind of reviving or making sure that there is a future for the rural landscapes. even here, people, and especially indigenous people, the Guna, for example, I just saw numbers that half of the Guna people now living in the city. So these are our impacts, and we have created 4 channels for capital. One is, and I posted that, the Generation Forest. It's a cooperative. Sadly, we can, for regulatory reasons, we cannot invite US citizens to become a member. Maybe you can fake a different passport, or some of them are thinking about that anyway, but we will not be able to take US citizens. But we have now, from over 30 nations, 8,000 people who became members of the cooperative, and we have invested over $35 million in reforestation in Panama, and we continue to do that. And there's a lot of environmental education towards the public and towards our membership. So that's one channel we created. Another one is Generation Forest Invest, where we basically sell, through pre-sale of carbon, we create the forest. We do the same with the third. So Generation Forest Invest is for family offices and for individuals. They're coming together financially a little bit on a higher level. And we want to build a 50,000 hectare forest, John knows about that, in Panama, to bridge with this forest, to bridge from the Pacific Coast indigenous lands to the Atlantic Coast indigenous lands. And we have started to do that, and we are aiming at 50,000 hectares over the next decade to build that there. By that, produce about 1% of the world fine tropical timber production, then coming from sustainable forest management. And the last one is our foundation, where we channel philanthropical funding and our Generation Forest project management company, with the idea to spread this outside of Panama. And we are looking now at different countries, from the US to Ukraine. We have started with local partners to build Generation Forest under each local condition. And there the idea is, in Panama, it's an investment, but outside, we want to sell the carbon to corporates, build the forest as a common good asset. Because if I don't need an investor, because I can sell the carbon or sell environmental system services, maybe not only carbon, also the others linked, then we can create forests which do not have an investor and no dividends to be paid. So we can use the dividends to build more forest. And all of you know this with the rice corn on a chessboard. From 1 hectare in 100 years, we're getting to 260 hectares. So we can build a lot of new forests through that, or can use this for other needs we as a society have, without making it a return to investors. So that's what we're doing. This whole thing is created. Our investors knows that this is an open source. They are not investing in IP, because the IP belongs to everybody. So whatever you want to know, understand, from financials to technical stuff, we're happy to exchange. And of course, we know it's not a one way. We have been in a collaborative way and have been highly benefited from that, of course, ourselves, because people are giving back always. So thank you for inviting me, John, to this very interesting group. I'm already inspired by this meeting, by all of you, and I hope to look forward to exchange experience and continue to empower each other.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And it's great work. And as you know, Anna and I and others are eager to collaborate with you in Panama. We are very eager to get some on-the-ground experience with a partner like you. And this was a great update. But we're going to try to pin you down and see what we can make happen on the ground.
You know where to find us.
Any questions or comments for Andreas before we go to forest presentation number 2 from Evgenia Emets?
I have a question. Andreas, thank you. It's very inspiring. I am somebody who reads a particular Substack called Redd Monitor, REDD Monitor, that is exposing many forest carbon projects that are doing extremely bad things, particularly with indigenous populations, in the name of conservation and carbon credits. And I just want to hear you speak a little bit to that. I'm assuming that you are aware of that issue, and how are you managing your project so that it doesn't become something like that?
Well, that's first of all, we are not in the red space. We are not in the. I was always critical on red, but I also have to say, this is something new, and all the time something new comes up, pirates appear. And I would like to also say, and I'm not defending any bad practice, for sure not, and we would not be out. I forgot this. So we have our 30th anniversary. 25th of October, you are all invited to come to Panama, right? So we're going to have a big party here and a symposium on how to work with native species, restore landscape with native species, and we want to have an exchange of experience. So we would not get to the 30th year if we would be part of these bad practices, because at the end, the bad practices are not going nowhere. But even so, it's not my deal. And actually, we benefited from this. You know, there was one sector which was criticized, so people moved more into my sector. But I have to say, with REDD, millions of hectares have been saved over the last decade as well, right? So it's not only bad, it's not only fraud, but of course, fraud is there and bad is there, and crime. And of course, it's uglier even because it's in the core, in the name of something good. That's the most horrible thing, right? And it's a mix of bad intentions, but it's sometimes it's bad management, sometimes, and I want to, if I have the short time, John, to do this, in my field, there is something which is now the big fashion, which is, and maybe we have some conflicts here conceptually with a few of you. Those are what they call the natural regeneration project, assisted or non-assisted natural regeneration. In our tropical landscape with people, those are, I would call it neo-colonial kind of enclaves. The people are not needed. Nature does it, and it does it wonderful. And you have biodiversity, but you have an enclave, and it's kind of a carbon dump, you know, like these dumps of electronics where they have in Kenya, a big place, and all our shit goes there, and then they can see whatever they do with it. The same is happening with carbon. So, Didi, I'm very aware of this, and we need to be outspoken, but we also need to develop the alternatives. And by doing that, these will be part of the history, but it's not, I mean, there are forces now who are using this against getting to action at all, right? So let's not pull us back because of this, but let's be vigilant and develop concepts to do this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Continued, but I'd like to give the floor to Evgenia Emets to talk about her project, which is molting into something even newer and nicer.
Thank you so much. Real honor to be here, and thanks so much, John, for the second invitation. Last time, I believe I was with all of you when I was in the Adirondacks in August, actually, and shared a bit about Eternal Forest. And I just wanted to say it's a real honor to go after Andrea's amazing presentation and beautiful, beautiful project of 30 years. Congratulations. So I'm going to share with you just a little bit about what I do and then where we are and what we are moving into. So I'm going to share straight away on this chat my little intro and talk it through so you can check later all the links. So I'm an artist. And just a super quick story, I started Eternal Forest Project 7 years ago when I moved to Portugal and witnessed some of the most and worst destructive fires and was a real ecological shock for me, but also cultural shock. And so for the last 7 years, I've been working with local communities, municipalities, local governments, tree planting organizations, festivals, exploring and understanding the science and the area of biodiversity of the forests, and decided to dedicate my practice to not only raising awareness about natural biodiverse forests and their significance on all different levels, but also creating a platform for 1,000 forest sanctuaries through art, created through art and artistic practice, focused on biodiversity and conservation, let's say, and stewarded by local communities for the long term, for the time of forest time, which is 1,000 years. So this is a beautiful, big vision and a dream, which I've been kind of nurturing and seeing this baby grow. And right now we are transitioning into becoming an organization. So I felt it is really right time to establish an organization for Eternal Forest, which probably will be something like a foundation first in Europe. And then we will see what happens, just to be able to kickstart the first forest sanctuaries. The way we work, very, very briefly, is we already have about 10 projects on board with us who are committed to going forward and dedicating either part of their land or all of their land to create a protected forest. Typically speaking, they are organizations with land, either communities, eco-resorts, eco-retreats, or they are just associations that their focus is regenerating forest and protecting it. So they are probably will be doing this work for already 15 to 20 years. And where we come in is we're bringing the element of art, culture, and community engagement into the whole equation, because what we have discovered so far, even if we do great work in ecosystem restoration and forest protection, in many cases, we actually losing communities, and they either don't understand what we are doing, or they're just like too far away from the concept. So what we want to do is bring them on board, but not only, we want them to basically be the stewards of this land, either as associated members, or if they're living nearby those big rewilding projects and forest regeneration projects, we want them to be really included. So I believe that art and culture can do huge work. And I'm going to share with you something special that I actually would love afterwards, if some of you have any feedback or ideas, to contact. And this website is already in the chat, but I'm going to super briefly share my screen if I can. Let me see if I can do that. I can share my desktop, but I'm not sure if I can. Let me see. If it's not gonna work, then I'm just gonna talk about that.
We're seeing your desktop now. Good.
Can you see the website with a green image?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So just super briefly, this is a new page that we have created. So what we are doing now, we are basically fundraising 35,000 euro. And the way I'm trying to do it is because I'm an artist, I'm just donating my art from the last 7 years of evolution of Eternal Forest. And you can later scan through and have a look. What I put together is the story of the evolution of Eternal Forest. What happened? What did we do? What kind of events? What kind of work with communities? Exhibitions. I have done a lot of artistic trails and experiences in beautiful spaces to raise awareness. And we outline here what we're actually going to do with the money and why we need this money. And then you can go through to contribute page and scan through all the different ways that people can contribute. What we really need right now is, I feel like as a leader of the project, as a founder, I need really good advisors. I want to get to the right people, and I want to put this project in front of the right eyes, so that the right people can take care of this baby together with me, so I'm not the only one. And you can have a look here. You can go to the page by art. People can also donate. And then we are, of course, inviting people to become a team member or an ambassador for Eternal Forest, which we will open this program in a little while. So I'm just super quickly going to show you the art page just to let you see what kind of things I'm offering. And my invitation to you is, of course, have a look at the story, think maybe you know people that are from philanthropic circles, maybe you know people who are art collectors, maybe you know people who would be great advisors for Eternal Forest to help us to open, you know, certain doors, because a new foundation, of course, needs to have a certain circle of people supporting it. And maybe, you know, partners that we could partner with in the long term. So for example, I'll just make super quick example, like what Andreas is doing is of course slightly different. So they're creating productive forests. But it's interesting because I was part of European Forest Institute conference. I was invited to speak there. And I think, Andreas, for you would be amazing to connect with them. I think they could be like great partner and connector, because they call what you do, I think, integrated forest management. So I visited, for example, a forest in Germany. So what happens there? We have a productive forest, we have forest in regeneration, we have a site where they do scientific study of what climate change does. And then they have forest in conservation. And the whole thing is maybe 400 hectares. And the forest in conservation is 30 hectares. And the rest is, you know, forest in production with selective management and sustainable management and so on. So I'm just giving you this example so that you can imagine that Eternal Forest doesn't need to be like this huge conservation thing. It can be part of a bigger project, or it can be part of a forest where you have sustainable management, where you have all kinds of, you know, goods and products, tangible and intangible with the forest. Yes, that's pretty much that. I have my contact there, and I think John wants to say something. Raise your hand.
Well, I'm just being mindful of the time. The gallery looks beautiful, Evgenia. I will be exploring it.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to suggest that we segue from art to art, which means I'm going to introduce Ivan Owen. Ivan is actually internationally renowned as the first guy to make the 3D printed prosthetic, which then sucked me into what became Enable. Strangely, after 10 to 15 years, we've reconverged. He's now in Ireland, and we're comparing notes on some ecology projects, and he's going to give us a brief presentation about what he's cooking up.
Before there, I just want Evgenia's work. I just want to make a short comment on this, if it is allowed. And
yes,
Evgenia,
please, Andreas. I did mean to allow time for questions for Evgenia and comments.
I'm happy to have just want to mention that I am happy to exchange with you. And actually, we have one of our project called For Forest, which is based on art. So we definitely need to talk.
I'm happy to help with connections, but you'll both be able to find each other in our public directory on our website, and probably by looking in the chat. Any other brief questions or comments on Evgenia's project? I'll be looking at the artwork, Evgenia. Okay, Ivan.
Thank you, John, both for the invite tonight and to the folks that have presented so far. This is a really wonderful group that you have here, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to chat with all of you. As John mentioned, I'm in Limerick, Ireland, and currently I am part of something called Social Glasa here, which is a group of climate creatives, and the local city council here has tasked me with working with my local community group in the area of addressing climate action through art, and it's one of those very vague missives that you get as an artist sometimes. So I was left to my own discretion as to how I thought I could contribute something meaningfully as an artist to this conversation. I got in touch with John, and we started chatting about. I'm an animator, among other things. Creating an animation that could express part of what the Eco-Restoration Alliance is doing. And this is something where I have the time and ability to create this animation here with my local community group in terms of the visuals. But the concept that I'd like, and what I'm looking for help with from this group, is I'd like to create a 1 to 1.5 minute animation. So, at 12 frames per second, where I send each individual frame of the animation, each still frame, to somewhere in the world with access to land that has already been restored, that is in the process of being restored, or has been pledged to be restored. So that frame of the animation can be printed out on paper, placed in situ on that land, and a photo of it taken with a smartphone with a border of the vegetation in that area around that piece of paper that has that frame of the animation on it. All of these get sent back to me, and then I composite them into a single animation, where what you have is this changing background of vegetation from different places in the world. But then we can calculate, for example, the total number of acres that this single animation represents and tell the story of how this animation was made through the contributions of individuals from many different places in the world, taking this one small action. I would then publish this in 2 formats. One would be the animation itself, and then would be a digital slideshow where each slide has the photograph from the finished animation, and has a caption underneath that gives information about where it was taken, the acreage there, what the stage of restoration is for that piece of land. I got feedback at one point when I was talking about this project to somebody here locally that visuals were very important to help make sense of what it is that I'm describing. So if I share my screen for a moment,
Yes.
what I have is a proof of concept test that I did just outside of my house here in Limerick. Is this working? Can you see this?
It saw it for a minute, but it went off.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Let me try again. Okay. Does this come through?
Yes.
Okay. So what I have here is I printed out, this animation is just a silly thing of beetles dancing that I happen to already have. It's a silhouette stop motion that I made with shadow puppets on a light box. I then printed it out onto individual pieces of paper and set those in various environments around my my garden and house here. And then what you see when I composited this all together, adjusted for perspective distortion, that sort of thing, is that I can get a cohesive movement of these figures against a myriad of backgrounds. So this is the conceptual test for what I would imagine would be the output of this process. The difference being that there would, of course, be an animation in black and white like this that more adequately represents what's being done by people restoring ecosystems around the world. And of course, the backgrounds would be a myriad of different places. I only had access to the vegetation here in Ireland, which is almost ubiquitously wet and green.
So Ivan, the animation on the paper will be some telling of the story of eco-restoration. And
Yes.
Each of the participants will have one frame that they photograph in their own context.
Yes, exactly. And then the story of the animation itself, I'm going to facilitate over the next couple of weeks a story exchange workshop between young adults and more elder members of the community here in Limerick County, where they're going to converse with each other about how things have changed in wild spaces here in Ireland. I'll record the audio from that, pull out interesting sound bites, and then from that storyboard visuals to express the way things might have changed here. But then we distribute the resulting animation and create it in that way. So that's it. But I tried to go through that
Great.
quickly. I have a Google form if people would be interested in participating to provide me with contact information and some other things. I'll put that into the chat here, and I can also answer any questions. But I would love to tell the story. And the other thing too is nothing's needed from the Eco Restoration Alliance in terms of funding or something like that, because I've already secured a small grant for my time to do this work here. So I would love to to do that.
Great. I put my hand up, so I'll go. If you have questions for Ivan, put your hand up too. So Ivan, I hope you'll give us a chance to have input on possible themes or motifs for the content of your animation. I think Irish Voices telling an Irish story will be great. But as you know, our group is particularly concerned about the dumbing down and the missimplification of the climate and eco-restoration story. And this is a nice opportunity to think about a new way of getting a good story well told out there in a new form. So we'll be at your service for that too.
Wonderful. That would be that would be great.
Anything else for Ivan? All right. We have 45 minutes and we have, I think Nadia had to leave. So we have two more presenters, Kate and Rob. And so we're going to be okay. I'm going to let Rob go first because he's in a farther time zone than Kate, if you don't mind, Kate. And Rob, what's new with you?
Hello, John. Hello, everybody. John asked me just before this meeting to give an update of what I'm doing currently. So I didn't really prepare anything except that I'm now going to put something in the chat, which basically is a link to the website, which is going to be formally live next week, but it's already live. And there's a copy of, it's a manuscript, which is a shorter copy of the book Cooling the Climate that Peter Banyard and I wrote. And this one is easier to read, faster to read, and more actionable. And it gives the outline of what is the background of the Cooling the Climate project, which basically is meant to exactly do that. Cool the climate, cool the planet. We have calculated that especially the tropical rainforests are the cooling organs of the planet, and that if we would restore about 2.8 million square kilometers, which is sizable, the total effect on the global temperatures would be 1 degree centigrade. So it would get us back from the threshold of 1.5, which we have already crossed. I operate from the Gaia theory of Lovelock, which basically says that you have to understand the globe, the Earth, as one living superorganism where all the ecosystems work together to create the conditions for life to thrive, which also means that the atmosphere, you can see the atmosphere as a product of the biosphere. It just not happens to be accidentally there and interacting with the biosphere. No, it is the product of the biosphere, as is weather and as is climate. So the link that we all have now worldwide with regeneration, and we have to do something about our planet, is actually stronger than is usually understood. At least half of the heating up in the world is not caused by CO2 per se. It is caused by the degradation of ecosystems, especially in the tropics, which cool most. And once this is understood, then you get a link between climate change, temperature, global warming, and biosphere degradation, which you can reverse actually much faster, because it's clear that getting our emissions down has been a complete disaster. We're not getting anywhere. And this is a far more actionable model to actually get us out of the mess we're in. And there's a second thing to it, because basically if you would dissect climate change into two things, it's temperature rise and it's the increase of extreme weather events. And as I said, I think that no, we have calculated that at least half of the heating up actually is not because of the greenhouse gases, but because of the destruction of ecosystems. For the increased extreme weather events that we see are to a lot larger extent actually caused by the degradation of the mechanisms within ecosystems to regulate the weather. Okay, so now I'm coming back to cooling the climate. Basically, based on our research, we are now starting a project to cool the climate by 1 degree centigrade, starting with the Amazon rainforest, as that is by far the most dangerous, fast approaching tipping point of dieback that will accelerate the heating up and the drying out of large parts of the planet. And if we don't stop the degradation, which is now self-accelerating, as we have seen in the droughts of 2023 and 2024, then basically the total extra heating up of the planet that will happen is something to the tune of 2.5 degrees centigrade within most of it within the next 2 decades. The positive thing is that if we are able to revitalize the Amazon rainforest, then we also create the financial and digital platforms and support systems that actually could do that regeneration everywhere, specifically in the tropics, specifically with the smallholder farmers in the global south, who then would be able to make a much better living for themselves and create a much nicer planet for all of us. Cooling the Climate will be launched, and the basic idea is actually very simple. Can we get money to all the people living in the forests? It's about 1.5 million families. It's not that much because, it's a forest. And so that would be maximum 10 million people if you count these families. And if we are able to get money into their hands and pay them and reward them for taking care of their own forest areas, and also transition open field monocultures and open field ranching to agroforestry or forests, then we will be able to regenerate fast. And I haven't mentioned one specific element which is very important and which has been discussed many times in this group. What is currently happening is that the biotic pump, a large mechanism of evapotranspiration through the leaves of through the leaves of trees that form clouds and rain and wind, has been collapsing during the last 2 droughts. And that system needs to be revitalized, and there are specific strategic places where you can do the revitalization first to pull in this humidity from the Atlantic Ocean to recycle that moisture over the forest, because forests make rain and clouds, and they cool. And if we do it at large enough size, then basically we can cool the planet. So that's roughly what I wanted to say. For the rest, I hope that you can have a look at the website, which is already live, although we're just going to launch formally next week. And that's about it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Donna?
Yes, I will try to keep this very brief. Question for you, Rob. Real supporter of what you're trying to do there. And I'm a layperson around this, but there's a compelling story that somebody like me can understand. So my question is, are you making some inroads? Are you being heard in some of those places where you need to be heard? And in that effort to get more collaboration across multiple efforts, have you been able to talk with people like with Joe Brewer and the Design School for Regenerative Earth and those efforts? I know we need it all, but the people here are already supporters. What do you need? What needs to happen to build more of the bridges across these other efforts to support this work.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. And I know that you're supportive of the project. You have been making that very clear on LinkedIn. So thank you so much. Basically, what we need is big finance to get money into the hands of these 1.5 million families on a very regular basis. And so the project has been pitched in Davos and on in front of several directors of pension funds, etc. And the ticket size that we started with was 20 billion, and then it was 24 billion to start with a B. And so far, they are very positive in that this could work in the form of green bonds. But for that, we need to create this digital financial platform that onboards people with their land and that they get paid out once we see that the forest is growing or they are putting agroforestry there, which is basically backed up by carbon sequestration. But the real effects is not carbon. The real effects is basically restoring the water cycles and the soils, and that give a vibrancy to the biosphere that has been so damaged. So I would say I've gotten a very great response to people asking people to come on the advisory council. Carlos Nobre is a great name in this respect. He is the co-chair of the science panel for the Amazon, and he was happy to come on board. There's other people, and I'm having an outstanding invitation, which hasn't materialized yet, to talk to the Secretary General of the ACTO, that is the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, which is an international organization that connects the Amazon countries to present this project. And I hope that they will take ownership of it, because they have the political clout, they have the treaty as a pillar, and they have the organization, all these countries, to roll out this project. So so far, so good. But we're getting interest for getting $10 million for the platform, and talks are going on. We're getting at least interested parties in doing a big ticket for green bonds. And as always, the first million is the most difficult, and we're working on that right now. And we've just partnered up with the Buckminster Fuller Institute. Stuart Cohen is also a member of the Eco Restoration Alliance, and he said that he will help us also to get us some initial funding pretty fast, and I hope this will really happen. I hope this suffices for now.
Thank you, Rob. Michael.
Yes, I'd like to promote Rob's and Peter Bunyard's book. I know you had it published in India, the old long form. I got copies of that, and then you you're getting it published in England. I'm just curious on how long before those are available. And now you're doing this short version. Do you need help getting that published, or do you have a publisher lined up? Because we really need to get these books out there.
Actually, Michael, thank you. You have been helping actually to get me a publisher, your Canadian friend. And he was looking into the last manuscript. What we noticed was that we had to be shorter in our writing, and a lot of the stuff that we put in there was too technical and stuff like that. So we've now come to the third version. The second version is basically available online. You order it, but the price is ridiculous. So anybody who wants it can get a free PDF from me. But now we are working to an even, that one is about 270 pages. The first one was even longer. And this one is 100 to 120 pages. And so we hope that this one is finally going to do what it needs to do. But anyway, you have the PDF, so you can read it already. And please share it widely if you think people are interested. Thank you. And of course, yes, publishers. We're going to do this in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. Yes, please send me something if you know someone who would be interested to publish.
Rob, I'll just say, and this is actually to all of you, that I have proposed to a number of people of my fellow Substackers that I'm interested in creating a publishing cooperative on this topic. And I already own the domain name and the publishing, and my book I published under Mycelium Books. So I have mycelium.org, and my parents-in-law had a publishing cooperative that was very successful with helping to edit each other's work, as well as sharing some of the, the both costs and profits. And I believe that Chelsea Green would serve as a distributor for us if we were to do that sort of thing. So I have experience with self-publishing quite successfully, and would be happy to work with others who wanted to do that together. So
That's an interesting development, Didi. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Didi. I'll reach out to you and see if what we can do. And by the way, Walter Jene has promised that he would help also get this story out. So that would be helpful, because he's a great voice.
He is a great voice and a great storyteller. Yeah. I'll put my email in the chat there.
I have your email anyway, but yes.
All right. So speaking of great voices and great storytellers, I'm now going to embarrass and introduce Kate Sutcliffe, who is new to this group, but who is interested in all the right things and is a really interesting person. So, Kate, it's your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'll be pretty short because I don't have a specific project to introduce. I also have the ugliest slide possible because I used to be in consulting and my whole job was making slides, and I'm rebelling and now just making hideous text-based slides instead.
I've seen worse. I just want to say I've seen worse.
Oh, then I have so much room to go still. So much that I need to improve on. Yeah, well, great to be here today and hear about all these amazing projects. I connected with John a few weeks ago because I'm interested in, my background is really in like adult learning and training. And so I'm really interested in like, how can we build better training programs that can reach more people around things like ecological restoration and forestry and things like that. So that's what we connected around. But I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to get involved in the space. So great to hear all these ideas. Just a little bit about me. I started off my career going to grad school for public health. Decided it wasn't for me, but I still really care about the health impacts of healthy ecosystems and how that impacts our daily lives as humans, both physically and mentally and emotionally. All of that really relates to nature. And then I spent the last 8 years working in management consulting, usually for state governments. So I've spent a lot of time working with state agencies and understanding how that process works, and how policy gets created and where it really matters, how it gets implemented. A lot of well-intentioned policy that crashes the moment it hits the ground because nobody thought about how to design the tech system behind it. But yeah, so I spent a lot of time working with state governments. And then I left that back in April because I don't want to do consulting anymore. And now I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing next. But I think my most relevant connections to ecological restoration work. So I've worked for 2 conservation corps in my time, first as a member and then as a leader for a women's crew this past summer. So I'm really passionate about conservation corps and helping young people develop conservation careers. What that can look like, the skills you need to do that, and just really getting young people out into nature and building a relationship with nature. That's something that's really, really important to me. I spent a year working for Mount Grace Land Trust, which is a land trust in Massachusetts that's really focused on forestry and agriculture. And I really spent my time there building partnerships, outreaching to forestry landowners, and helping put resources in the hands of conservation volunteers so that they could do good work in their local towns. And then I spent a little bit of time studying wilderness management and how people relate to wilderness. I was very interested in how people portray their experiences of wilderness on social media. Spoiler alert, it's really depressing. Turns out when a lot of people start posting about wilderness on social media, they feel like they aren't living up to how they should be experiencing nature. And you get all these interesting psychological effects. That's another story, but yeah, so I spent some time doing that as well. Yeah, and then I guess just some things that I'm thinking about today or I spend a lot of time thinking about that, would love to follow up with anybody if this is also in your mind. Somewhat randomly, I do personal finance training and I focus on AmeriCorps ecological programs. So I've done those for a lot of conservation programs in New England because young people can't go into green careers and none of us can go and can be able to think about the things we care about if we're in a financially precarious situation. So money is important when it comes to ecological restoration. I'm working on some projects right now thinking about how to train farmers in disaster scenarios. And then obviously, like I said, I'm thinking about conservation corps and green workforce development. And then I've started doing a lot of thinking and some talking with people about how to crowdfund ecological restoration, particularly targeting people in the US who profess to be really worried about climate change, but aren't taking any action about it. Like how can we get those people to actually crowdfund lots of ecological restoration projects? What is the psychology behind that? How can we get them to take action to hopefully fund all the great things that y'all are talking about? So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. Like I said, I don't have a specific project right now, but just some things that I'm thinking about and would love to talk to anybody about or connect with down the road. So thanks for your time.
Well done. Thank you. Questions or comments for Kate? Kate, I will say that I've just become aware of a grant in New York State for developing urban forests. I've just put a link in the chat. I'm probably going to follow up with you on that because I think it's an interesting possibility. We are also exploring 8 brilliantly situated acres right on the river just north of the city on a bike trail that goes between an urban wilderness canyon and the river on its way to the lake. If we could get that, it becomes a really good project, and we're pitching it as an eco center and
Amazing.
a training program kind of a thing. So you'd be very helpful getting involved in that kind of thing.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll check out that grant and follow up with you.
I also wanted to mention that among the things you were talking about, we have often discussed and never actually followed through on the idea that as these natural disasters like the wildfires and the floods become more and more prominent, there's probably an opportunity, and this is something actually that Didi has been involved in. There's an opportunity to come in and say, we feel your pain. Let's talk about what we can do to make sure this never happens again, and then give them the kind of training that would have been even more timely 20 years ago, but for which they might now be receptive. Before I invite Didi to comment on that, I will also point out that with your past interest in epidemiology and healthcare, and I may have mentioned this before, you should be aware that Didi's classic book, The Ecology of Care, does a really interesting job of pointing out that earth care and human health care are 2 sides of the same coin, and that when you think of either of them individually, you actually do a disservice to both. So Philip's got his hand up, and Didi may or may not want to throw something in there as well.
Kate, great to meet you. Thanks for your snapshot there, and don't feel like you have to follow any protocols. We're inventing it as we go here. 2 things. One, if you aren't already familiar with Bio4Climate, we've been doing a lot of, okay, so you're familiar with our Miyawaki Forest projects throughout New England. And
I helped plant the one down the street from me that I think Maya led a couple years ago. I live right by the, yeah.
And then the second thing, I think I heard you say you're interested in training farmers in disaster scenarios. Did I hear that correctly, or? broadly?
Yeah, that's with another organization that I work with. I'm doing a research project for them. They do things like what if there's nuclear war and there's no sun? Like how do you retrain farmers to survive in that scenario? So
Well,
it's a
perhaps
little
we
out
can,
there, but
perhaps we can have a conversation offline. I'm very involved at the county and state level in Maryland, working on what I declare is an ongoing and unfolding food emergency, given how dependent our agriculture is on fossil fuels and the fact that we are now peaking and declining, and solar and wind are not going to be able to replace those functions. There's probably upwards of 15 calories of fossil fuels behind every calorie of food we eat. So there's an urgent need to figure out how to respond to that disaster. It's not an acute one, it's a chronic one. And increasingly, I don't know, I just saw a report 2 days ago showing the market increase from 30 to 150% in the price of food that we buy in a grocery store. So anyway, I'll put my email in, maybe we can have a call.
yeah, that sounds great. I'll definitely reach out. Thank you. I also care about chronic disasters too. So I care about them
Well,
not
then
happening.
you're
to be
living in the right
clear.
century.
I try.
Kate, I'll just say I grew up in Cambridge and my family's still all there, so I am there every week or two to see my adorable niece. And yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover in our interests in terms of kind of disaster resilience, farming, and public health. You'll, as John said, you'll see if you read my book. It's there's a lot there that we have to talk about. That was kind of how I got into this space, was thinking about how climate change impacts public health and how do we plan for that, and looking at Cuba as one really amazing example of that.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. Let me know if you're in town. I'm pretty free during the days right now, so I would love to meet up.
Great.
Always
And
better.
I put my phone number back a little ways in the chat, and WhatsApp is usually,
Perfect. Yes.
emails vanish within seconds for me, so WhatsApp is
I
better.
understand.
Yes, I bet you do.
Bruce, your hand's up.
Yeah, Kate, I pricked my ears up. You were interested in how to make solutions inclusive and enable lots of people to get involved. And you also talked about some experience in crowdfunding. And we're starting the front end.
I would not say experience, aspirational focus.
Aspirational and interesting getting involved. So I'll send you some stuff on our biosphere restoration plan and empathy economics. If you find a telephone number in the chat, I'll connect with you on WhatsApp.
Perfect, thank you.
Reached out to you on LinkedIn. Okay.
Any other comments or further announcements? I have one more that I will interject here. As mentioned previously, at our next town hall meetings, 2 weeks from now at 9 p.m., we'll be going over the bylaws, but 2 weeks later, we will have a special town hall, a so-called masterclass that Phoebe Barnard and Leonard are helping to organize. It's going to include John D. Liu and a number of other luminaries talking about a more focused and dedicated 1 to 2 hours. So you may want to put that one on your calendars. That will be March 19th, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And it will be a different format with a different moderator, although apparently I've been recruited for the panel discussion. And for that matter, if other people have other formats or ways they want to engage with this community, I'm under no illusion that this is the only way to do what we do, but I'm very pleased that we have periodic gatherings. And so, you know, it's your podium as well as mine. Any other comments, questions, announcements, or topics for the 16 minutes that remain in this 2-hour block? We can end a few minutes early.
I'll throw in a topic for you. We've taken the view that to get sufficient financing into major restoration projects at sufficient scale, that we actually have to make these projects profitable. I talk about empathy economics because we're talking about caring capitalism, but all too often NGO not-for-profits gets discarded very quickly when one's talking to the really big funders. And we take the base view that delivery of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, moving from 2.8 billion people on the planet living well now to 9 billion people living well by 2050, would, if you can deliver it, create an enormous growth in global GDP. Now, the way to deliver it, as Rob will tell you and others in this space, is through massive land improvement and land restoration and increased productivity of the oceans through ocean restoration, bringing back the phytoplankton and the productivity of the seas. So if we can get the big piles of capital to understand that actually you could invest ethically and profitably, and that's where the secure future is, because on our current course at the moment, all assets are at risk through the potential collapse of societal structures. So I'm throwing that out because normally we talk about NGOs, we talk about not-for-profit, and perhaps we should be thinking more about how we make things sustainably, ethically, green and profitable. Topic for discussion.
Thank you. And do you have an example answer to give?
Well, obviously the example is what we're trying to do with the Biosphere Restoration Plan. We're pointing that out, that restoring the whole of the North African forests, for instance, restoring the Mediterranean environments, which have been totally changed over the last 6,000 years, and indeed over 10,000 years, human activity has led to the reduction in the total amount of life on the planet, so greater than 50%. And if you go back to Gaia theory, you understand that our global environment has evolved as life has evolved. All living things colonize and stabilize. And that stabilization process, we all understand, planting on the side of a hill will stop the erosion. But if you think about that integrated total web of life, actually acting to manage the climate. So this is the Amazon forest putting up not just water vapor, but the particles within that to control the cloud formation. And it's the oceans and the microorganisms at the surface of those oceans reacting with that surface micro layer, controlling the amount of lipid on it, which has an effect on the rate of evaporation, and controlling the amount of diethyl sulfide and other nuclei particles that go up into the atmosphere. That actually is the mechanism by which the integrated superorganism manages its own environment, no differently from all of us sweating or having our blood vessels dilate. It's that engine of life that we have reduced to half its size, which is now suddenly being overwhelmed because it's just being reduced and we're putting too much pressure. So I give that to you as a way of thinking about it, and as a possible way of getting there. So we have an empathy coin. We're inviting people to invest in that. We're creating a digital currency which will be based on the health of the biosphere and the deficit of 550 billion tons of living carbon. And as that comes back, the argument is that you deliver all of those goals, you have a healthier, safer world where real growth is recognized as an advancement in knowledge and through the use of sustainable energies, rotation of the earth, solar, etc. And you set up a global accounting system which recognizes the true cost and real value of every action.
I keep wondering. I keep wondering if there's a way for small coalitions of the willing to achieve some of this by pooling resources without requiring, a global infrastructure or winning over the masses.
Absolutely. I think that this is a set of ideas, most importantly, for people to grab hold of and take forward. Younger, brighter minds than ours will take hold of it and move it along. But it's a slightly different way of looking at it. But I believe it's the only way we are going to, if you look realistically at the power in the world at the moment, we have to turn their energy in the right direction.
Joe, it's possible you're going to get the last word, or that someone else is going to raise a hand, but it's your turn.
Well, I hope I can make my microphone work. We're in since early this year, we've had a change of administrations here in the U.S. There's other stuff going on in the world as well. And maybe a few meetings out, might we think about having a sort of strategic, what do we do now sort of meeting to explore collaborations, change of focus, more emphasis on the focus, or, just sort of we're in a different environment now. How are we going to deal with it ourselves and collectively with others?
It's a good idea. It's certainly, the environment has changed. We ought to see if there are ways of turning the lemons into lemonade, or otherwise taking advantage of the changed context. If there are other people besides Joe who have ideas about how to organize or construct a program around that, let me or him know, and we'll do it. I think it's a good idea. Milt.
Yeah, I just was thinking that and wanted to ask Brew about this. This seems to me to be ethically based as much as it's technically based. To create really an ethical flow, understanding and flow with nature. And I think nature will solve a lot of those problems for us. So is that part of your work? And if not,
absolutely. If we had our failure has been to implement laws to protect the environment. Had we known earlier what we were doing, so the importance of protecting nature and valuing that is critical to what we do. If we had a full complement of biomass on the planet, we would probably be much better able to cope with the environmental damage and pollution that we've caused than we are now. I'm suggesting that Gaia is becoming overwhelmed with the loading we put on it. So yeah, it's across the board. It's education. It's teaching young children natural history, care for the environment, understanding that we are part of this whole operative system, and that actually the patterns of nature are that there are life cycles that are driven by sex and reproduction, reaching out and colonizing. And in the big scheme of things, humanity can be seen as the flower of all life on Earth, in that we start to reach out into the universe. When human beings become capable of that, they start to do it. So if you talk to any child and say, where are we going to be in 300 years' time? They will describe to you the Star Trek future. And that only works if you absolutely cherish your home and look after it. And if we don't do that, we won't have that future. We'll just have Mad Max.
Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
I was saying Aditi's hand was up. I wonder if she's still with us and wanted to say something. And the
Yes.
answer...
Hello. But absolutely, I think covered it quite beautifully, but in our work, this is precisely what we're also trying to do, right? Being able to translate how we understand value. Similarly with Dan's work, right? As opposed to speaking to the world largely about, well, we've gotten food wrong because we're doing it at the cost of planetary destruction. Instead, the dialogue is around, well, if we focus on nutritional density, you are able to recreate or work towards the same outcome without being able to ask for a regime change at large, which is far more violent for people to comprehend. And similarly with the works of John D. Liu, right? We work largely on creating spaces where one can be inspired and then create pipelines for mass participation that then eventually leads to action. So both pipelines is what we're trying to work towards, and let's see what gets us there.
Yeah, John D. Lewis is providing the evidence that this works. Saying, put it on an enormous scale, and it'll all come right, and we'll create the jobs. And with a lot of changes, you know, we've actually got to build a mechanism to create a universal income, because we're all going to be put out of work by AI and robots, and much faster than you expect.
Absolutely. But from the looks of it, it seems like I used to be working on an unconditional basic income program in Ghana just shortly before this. But again, that was only possible through a cryptocurrency-based program, given none of the states or NGOs had the cash to give us. So it was only possible through utilizing a stable coin called CELO. However, given the disruptions in the market, that money also ran out fairly quickly in a year's time. But again, the outcomes of it are magnificent to date.
Well, if you could do it at sufficient scale, and you take totally degraded land, and then you greatly improve it, improve its productivity, and allow the societies and economies to build up as that happens, you create wealth. And if the coin that we're creating, the empathy coin as we're proposing it, represents a share in that plan and a share in all that equity, then you can share that out. And so eventually it becomes able to pay the dividends. So that, you know, the farmer who is improving his soil and looking after his environment gets paid the full value for the work that he's doing. Because at the moment he's not. We don't recognize the full value of that. And the person that's polluting and doing the damage doesn't pay for the cost of that damage. So it's you know, a healthy economy would make it work.
Magnificent. Congratulations.
A challenge. 1 minute for Donna, 1 minute for Didi, 1 minute for goodbye.
Okay. Building on the things that everybody has said, and John, you've opened the door to having a different format of meeting, and I think the one with Phoebe will be like that in some ways on March the 19th. But can I suggest, if you're open to it in a way that doesn't put any undue pressure on you, because you do a masterful job of organizing these, but perhaps to be open to more of an open format, as Joe had suggested, where people come together with more of a generative dialogue of a taking stock and allowing it to be a little messier, and letting people know that's what it's going to be. So if people aren't up for that, they don't come. But people that want to have that kind of conversation decide they're going to be there to have that. And then just, you know, building on what Brew and Didi were just describing, it is already happening anyway. Fair enough, but we're living in a Western industrialized society here. And so what are the things that we could be doing? Because that story of separation, the roots are so deep. So the only other thing I'll reference here is the work of Vanessa Andreotti, and I've been in conversation with her around, she is training AI as emergent intelligences, training them in indigenous knowledge systems as companions. Very cool. So I've been in some conversation with her. Also had a conversation yesterday with Will Ruddock, Grassroots Economics, and he's just written a book which makes it, some of the stuff, really accessible. So if we could bring some of that thinking into, how do we bring this into the world? Time's up. Bye.
Well, no, yes, time's up. Also, I would love to get presentations from both of them. Also, I'd be perfectly happy to have them in a messy meeting of the sort you're talking about. That'd be great. Didi.
1 minute to take down capitalism. I'm just going to propose that it is possible that we're never going to get to where we want to get to with the paradigm that some people get to hoard a lot more resources than others. And that it's just worth looking at how we are designing our projects and how much of a given that is, given that we were almost all raised in those circumstances. But resource guarding in a pit bull, like is squeaking a ball right here, isn't very, it doesn't work well in a pack when one resource guards. And it doesn't work very well in a society, and it doesn't work well in an ecosystem. So anyway, that's my 1 minute to take it down.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the pit bull for the sound effects. Okay, everybody. Thank you all. Reminder that you can get back to this recording and the chat notes by way of the agenda, and a link to the agenda is itself in the calendar invite that may have brought you here. We'll see you 2 weeks from now. Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.
Thanks so much.
Bye.